name is Susie Spear, and I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Susie.
My sobriety date is October 23rd, 2012. I'm a member of the Gratitude Study Group in downtown Raleigh. Thank you all for having me. Thank you, Steve, for asking me to speak. We meet on Mondays and Thursdays at 7 o'clock like this group. Mondays for our group is an open speaker meeting, and Thursdays is a closed big book study. I would love to see any of you there if you're in Raleigh. I have a sponsor, and I'm actively sponsored. I meet with my sponsor every single week, and I see her multiple times a week just due to circumstances. I didn't plan it that way. But I do see her multiple times a week and still meet with her. And I am a sponsor, and I actively sponsor, all of the women that I sponsor, and I meet with them weekly and read the book. We're always in some kind of literature, and that's been really important to my sobriety. I do have a service position in my home group, and I'm very active there too. I'm at my home group. I was taught to be at my home group every time that the doors are open. And, I'm not there tonight. I was not there last Thursday because I was speaking, and that's the only circumstance that I'm not there. So I'm going to tell you what I was like, what happened, and what I am like today. My childhood was not a good one. I hear people in AA say that they didn't know they had a good childhood. Mine was pretty terrible. There was every kind of abuse in my house that exists, and I do come from an alcoholic household. And the only reason that I tell you those things is that's my experience growing up. None of that makes me an alcoholic. I drank at these things for, a few years and use them as excuses. But what I know today is that none of that makes me an alcoholic. I may be predisposed or whatever that science is. I don't know too much about it. I know that I'm an alcoholic because I like the effect produced by alcohol. And when I put alcohol in my body, I can't tell you how much I'm going to drink, what I'm going to do, where I'm going to end up, who I'm going to be with. And quite honestly, I didn't really care. I'm from Alabama. My parents had 3 kids very rapidly, and they got divorced. So that didn't work out as they had planned. And my mom was married and divorced a few times. We moved around a lot, changed schools a lot. I had my brother and sister with me, and I was pretty comfortable in that. My grandparents on both sides of my family, I never saw them drink, smoke, curse, wear a bikini, anything. They were all very straight-laced, and they came from very different faiths. But I grew up knowing that they believed in something bigger than they were. And that, their lives were good, even in the bad times. So I did have an example in both sets of my grandparents of what it looked like to have a relationship with God. We moved around a lot. My parents, even though they weren't married, they still bickered back and forth a lot. And I always felt put in the middle. I wasn't ever put in the middle, but I always felt that way, like I needed to choose a side. And I was very manipulative from very early on, before I ever took a drink. I would lie to my dad about what my mom had said. I would lie to my mom about what my dad had said, just to get attention. I didn't really care what kind of attention it was. So we moved around a lot. My mom was married and divorced one guy and then got married to this other guy, and he was absolutely terrible. And he abused all of us in a variety of ways. And eventually we moved to Tennessee with him. And so that was the first time that I felt super isolated. I didn't have my extended family around. And I certainly wasn't going to tell anybody the truth about what was going on at home. So, I just felt really isolated. And I didn't really care to make friends. I didn't really care about school. I didn't really care about much of anything, to be quite honest, as a really young kid. I was just trying to make my way until I turned 18. I did know that. I knew when I turned 18 I could have my own life, and I was just waiting for that day. So where we moved in Tennessee, I named the town one time a couple of years ago, and it's really not important, but someone came up to me after the meeting and said, I said, well, it's a really small town of 1,000 people. they were all related and we weren't. And someone came up to me after the meeting and they're like, I know what you're talking about, and the population is like 450 people. And I looked it up, and that's true. So it was even smaller than, I could even imagine as a young kid. And everyone was related, and we were the new people, and, all the attention was on the new people because they all knew each other's business and were happy to tell you about it. And we lived halfway up a mountain, and, we just, ran around outside with our dogs all the time. At that time, I just wanted to get out of my house. There was so much chaos and craziness going on. I've never gotten along with my mother. And I was, really angry with her for moving me away from all of my family. And so I asked if I could start going to church because I saw that work for my grandparents. And, my parents didn't really go to church. So I said, I want to go to church. Please let me go. I probably got my grandparents involved. Anyway, we were allowed to go to church, me and my siblings. And I felt really comfortable and at home when I started going to church. I just knew that if I listened and I learned what they were telling me and I was a good girl and memorized Bible verses, that my circumstances at home were going to change. I knew that as a young girl. And when that didn't happen, I became very angry. For a few years, I just thought, God's going to come and save me and help me out. This is really going to happen. I knew all the church people knew what was going on at our house. I didn't ever tell them, but I knew they knew and they weren't helping. I knew everyone in town knew and they weren't helping. But once again, I was just not willing to say anything either. So I remember a time, growing up when I was still pretty young, probably like middle school age, that I turned my back on God, and I did that consciously. I said, I'm going to continue going to church to get out of my house. I really don't want to be there. But I don't subscribe to this whole thing. I must not come from a good enough family. We must not have enough money because we were very poor. Something else must be going on here. I'm going to continue going, but I just, God's just not for me. And, I remember that. And I remember just not listening, not caring, just getting out of my house. Everything was great, just to be out of the house. So, I continued doing that for a few years. My mom did eventually divorce that man, and, I just tell the story. This is just how chaotic my childhood was. My mom woke us up one morning and said, hey, we're moving. And we were like, okay, whatever. We did that a lot. That wasn't a new thing. It wasn't shocking. And she's like, hey, we're moving. Get up. Pack as much as you can. The movers are going to be here soon. And so the movers showed up. And the movers showed up with guns. And I thought that was so exciting. And I'm like, ooh, this is what happens when people get divorced, And it was very chaotic. So she divorced him. She got remarried again. And I actually liked the last guy. I'm like, this is going to be all right. And we moved again. So, she was married to him, and I was about high school age. And I still did not get along with her. Just because I liked her husband at the time does not mean that we got along. And, if I wanted to go and do something, and my mom said no, I knew that all I had to do was wait a couple hours. I didn't really understand at the time that it was a blackout, but I knew that I just had to wait a few hours, and whether she said yes or no didn't matter. I was still going to go do what I wanted to do, and she wasn't going to remember anyway, so I'd just tell her the next day she told me I could. And I did that a lot, and I was not even drinking at that time. I just wanted to get what I wanted to get. And when she was on to me at some point that that's what I was doing, she started getting my brother and sister involved, and that I didn't like that. So I started writing up contracts and having her sign them, Susie can go to the movies at midnight or whatever it was, and just showing it to her the next day, well, you don't really have a case. I'm smarter than you. You signed a contract, so I'm not in trouble. And, those are just the things that I did. I still did well in school, which was my justification for doing everything I was doing. I did move out of my mom's house when I was 16 or 17. I just couldn't take it anymore. It was so awful. And that was probably the best my life had been, quite honestly. But I just couldn't take it. So I moved out, and I moved in with my boyfriend, who was a few years older than me, and convinced my dad that that was a good idea. You know, I got exactly what I wanted. And then, you know, I had bills to pay, so I got a job, and I, like, worked at IHOP, and he worked at Pizza Hut, and it was perfect. And we were going to be together forever. And, you know, I didn't talk to my mom for a few years. She showed up to my high school graduation, and then that would just set, like, our relationship from that point up until here recently. We talked for a while and then wouldn't, and then extended amounts of time. I just, you know, couldn't deal with her. So I briefly went to college. You know, up until this point, I can say that I drank maybe a handful of times between high school and my brief stint in college. But I was always really afraid of alcohol and drugs. You know, I'd grown up seeing what they did to people, and I always said and maintained, like, I do not want to be my mom. You know, I knew that there was just a deep sadness in her, and, you know, I knew that I wouldn't be able to live as long as she did, the way that she was living. And so, you know, I drank a handful of times. I probably did it to fit in or be cool or something. You know, I don't remember getting drunk. But I went to college briefly. That wasn't for me. A couple hours away from where I was living. And I just missed it so much. And I moved back, went to trade school, and graduated. So at this point, I'm about 20 years old, and start dating another guy, because that's what I like to do. Just, you know, I'm done with this person, find someone else, repeat. And he told me, he was quite a few years older than me, and he told me, he said, Susie, you're about to be 21 years old, and, like, you don't know how to drink, so it's going to be really embarrassing when you go to the bar, and, like, you don't know what to order or what's going on. And I thought he was so smart, and I started drinking immediately. I'm like, this is what I've been missing. This guy is so smart. And, you know, he's quite a bit bigger than me. I'm not, you know, incredibly large or anything, but he's quite a bit bigger than me. And I would just started drinking with him, drink for drink, and we would drink whiskey and water and moonshine. So that's what I like to drink, and that's what I always drank. So I pretty much drank alcoholically from that first time on. You know, I didn't ever try to control my drinking. There was one time, for spite, I didn't drink for about a month because he had pointed out my drinking to me, and his drinking was way worse. And, you know, by the end of like 3 or 4 weeks, he was just handing me alcohol, like, please drink. I just can't deal with you. But, you know, other than that, I never try to control my drinking. I didn't ever take one drink and think, oh, I'm just going to drink this one. Like, that was not my purpose. I drank to get as drunk as possible, black out, pass out. I didn't care. I knew when I took, you know, I really liked moonshine because you could drink, as long as you could keep it down, that was the trick, but as long as you could keep it down, like, you could be absolutely out of your mind within, like, 10 minutes, 20 maybe. And so that's what I did. I didn't really like drinking in bars because I would get so drunk within the first 30 minutes to an hour, like, they just used me as a coat rack. And I was okay with that. You know, like, I was okay with sitting in a bar, passed out, the people around me who drank the way I drank, not doing anything about it, and just leaving me there. I didn't see a problem with it because I was getting what I needed. That relationship was just swell. We couldn't come up, his family was very influential in the town we lived in, and we couldn't come up with a prenup, so we bought a house instead. And I thought that was so smart. Like, we're just going to buy a house. I'm like, this is beautiful. And I set up my garage. I didn't care about anything in the house, but I set up my garage with a refrigerator. I went and got as much moonshine as they would let me have from the mountain, and, you know, a few cases of whiskey. and got a big fan, and I would just sit in there and chain smoke cigarettes and drink and call people. And I loved to do that. And I would call people and dump all of my garbage on them and then hang up the phone and call someone else. And I just had no problems with it. I didn't want to hear what anyone else was going through. I didn't care. And, you know, it hurts to say that today, but I really didn't. I did not care about a thing anyone had to say to me. And my family still today is like, you have the worst luck with phones. And I'm like, no, I thought we talked about this. So, I mean, I just could not keep that up for very long. It was the fact that I was in Tennessee. It was the guy I was dating. It was, you know, I mean, we would just, like, go out on a boat and get wasted and, like, fist fight, and I'd get tossed off the boat. And I had I didn't see anything wrong with that whatsoever. But I definitely knew it was his fault. So I called my sister. My sister had moved to North Carolina, and, you know, I called my sister one day, and I'm just like, I can't take it here anymore. I got to get out of here and get away from this guy. You know, I think when I come to visit you in 5 weeks, I'm just going to move to North Carolina. And she was all about it. She was like, yes, you can live with me and my husband for a while. It'll be so great. I love you. It's going to be amazing. And texted me like 20 minutes later and was like, you can pick up your U-Haul, you know, on Alcohol Highway at 7 o'clock. Just set it all up for me. And I'm sure I had told her that many times before, but for whatever reason, she knew I was serious this time. So I did that. I moved to North Carolina. I was able to get a job before I moved. And what I liked to do at my job, what I always did, was I would get in there, I would get buddy up with the manager, see what their weaknesses were, take their job, and then manipulate my schedule to where it fit around my drinking. And that was a relatively easy process for me. You know, it wasn't that I was qualified for the job or needed the job, but I could make you think that I did. And I could fake it for long enough and kind of figure it out. So that's what I did when I got here. And I didn't mind at all to work 12-hour shifts as long as I could have a day off in between. So I would work a day, be off a day, work a day, be off a day, work. And I loved that. I knew if I was at work for 12 hours, then I would get some work done. I would make some money, and, you know, I wouldn't drink. And then that night, I was going to be off the whole next day, so I could drink that night if I wanted to, or go to sleep, wake up in the morning, pretend to do a few things, and just drink all day. And that's what I did most of the time. When I moved to North Carolina, you know, I at least had people and had friends who asked me to do things when I lived in Tennessee, and that just annoyed me. I knew that I could not drink before going. I had to do that. I couldn't be around people. And I didn't really want to go anyway. So when I moved to North Carolina, I didn't have anyone calling me anymore. And I thought that was great. You know, I didn't want to go out. I just wanted to sit at home and drink by myself and be miserable and cry and call people until I died. You know, and I never really had a plan growing up. I knew that I would probably, you know, die at the hands of like one of my mom's husbands, you know, before I was 18. So I never really had a plan. The fact that I made it to 21 was pretty incredible to me. So I was just trying to ride it out as long as I could. I got my dad to move to North Carolina. The only thing I've just like ever wanted was to be in the same town as my dad. And he moved to North Carolina. And then, you know, he lived 15 minutes away from me, and I couldn't even show up to his house, you know, for like 2 months. He was having to come to my job to see me. And, you know, that's just who I was. I couldn't show up for anyone in my family. I couldn't show up for anyone, but I definitely could not show up for anyone in my family. So one day I was feeling particularly terrible about myself, and I decided to help my dad with something. You know, he had been asking me, and it was a computer question, so trying to, like, you know, teach your parents computer stuff is kind of challenging at times, and I just, like, didn't want to do it. So I was feeling bad about myself, and I finally decided that I was going to go help him with the question he asked me about months prior. And I can tell you, like, I am positive I drank before going. I don't know what or how much. Like, I just would get up and start drinking. So I'm positive that I had. I drank when I got there. No one was going to tell me what to do or how to do it. My family knew that too. I helped him with what he needed help with, and I left. I wasn't really trying to hang out. I was just trying to feel a little bit better. And, I left his house, got really close to where I live, maybe within a mile. And I hit two people who were walking in their neighborhood with my car. And, alcohol did not work for me. I didn't ever do a drug. I'm a real alcoholic. I only drank, and I only drank for 4 years. And that's where alcohol took me. That's where alcohol led me. I blew a .2, which I think is pretty respectable. But, I can tell you that I knew everything that was going on. Alcohol no longer worked for me. It did not quiet the noise in my head. I couldn't get drunk as hard as I tried. I definitely could not be sober. I was just at that jumping off place where I didn't know what to do or how to live, and quite honestly, I didn't really care. But at that point, I'd never been in trouble in my life. I had gotten like one speeding ticket. And I called the cops, and they came and got me and took me to jail. When I got there, I'd called my sister too, and she had showed up and kind of knew what was going on. And when I went to jail, I went in front of the magistrate judge, and he couldn't even look at me. It was at like 1 o'clock in the morning. I had been there for a few hours, and he couldn't even look at me. He just, he said to me, I hope that you had a really good time, because you almost killed one woman, and the man that you hit is probably going to die. So I hope you're ready to spend 10 years of the rest of your life in jail, in prison, and I really hope it was worth it to you. And then just like shooed me away. He couldn't even look at me. And, I'd done a lot of just crappy things to my family, to my friends, but seeing the look in his eye, like I hadn't been able to look at myself in the mirror for a long time at that point. And just seeing someone also not able to look at me, that hurt. And I really didn't care what happened to me at that point. I would never say that I've been depressed before, but that night, I just really didn't care what happened to me. I wanted those people that I hit to be okay. So my sister bailed me out of jail, because that's what my family always does. They swoop in and try to help me out any way they can. And she bailed me out, and I called an attorney, and he said, you need to go have an alcohol assessment. So I did that, and I was really honest on this alcohol assessment. And the man that was giving it to me, he was like 75, and he had white hair, and he looked so nice, and I just knew that he was going to be kind to me. And he looked at me. He didn't even get halfway through it. And he said, you're going to damn treatment. And I was just like, okay, like I don't know what that means, but okay. And on my 25th birthday, which was a few days after that, was my first day in a 30-day treatment program. I told the people that I worked for exactly what happened. And, they gave me time off to go to treatment. And while I was in treatment, they did not tell me what was going on with these people at all. Hindsight is 20/20, and I can see that that was a good thing, because I was able to focus, learn about alcoholism, be introduced to Alcoholics Anonymous. But it was still really scary. I didn't know if they were going to come arrest me one day. They said, they may show up to arrest you because this man has died, and there's nothing we can do if that happens. So that was a pretty scary situation. I went to treatment and went to an AA meeting the day that I got out of treatment. Someone from Alcoholics Anonymous picked me up and took me to a meeting 2 hours early, and I was furious because who needs to be at an AA meeting 2 hours early? But that woman sat there and explained to me what Alcoholics Anonymous is, what it is not. She was not going to give me legal advice. She was going to tell me her experience and how she got sober and how she stayed sober. And she's been sober for 38 years. And I thought she was lying. I just knew she drank occasionally. But I was able to sit down and listen to that woman. I was sober for 3 months before I went to prison. So, both of the people that I hit, it was a husband and wife, they were both completely okay today. They don't have any existing injuries from that car accident. And I know that's God. I know I didn't have anything to do with that. And they requested to talk to me at my sentencing and, just hugged me and told me that they hoped I could get my life together. And, I really didn't know how to take it. Here are these people who I have ruined a big part of their life, and they had a lot of rehab they had to do at that point, and they just looked at me and told me that they hoped that, I would forgive myself, that I would find God and continue doing what I was doing. And I was able to do that. I'd started working the steps before I went to prison, and then I was able to work steps while I was in prison. I finished all 12 steps while I was in prison, and it was not graceful, and it was a group effort. My home group, which is still my home group today, they would write me, they would send me books, they would come to this maximum security prison to visit me. And my sponsor at the time was pregnant, and she would bring her 8-month pregnant self into that maximum security prison. And at that point, I just did not understand why she was doing that. I would say, why are you bringing your unborn child in here? Are you crazy? Why? And she just said, you need to get through these steps so you can understand. She encouraged me to sponsor women while I was in prison. If I was on the 4th step, I was taking somebody through a 3rd step. And I can tell you today that one of those women stayed sober for a few years. None of those women are sober today. Some of them are not alive. But, doing 12-step work was really, it kept me sober for sure. And you will hear a lot of crazy stuff on a 5th step when you're in prison. I was kind of afraid. I was kind of scared, to be honest. But there were women that brought meetings into that facility, and they helped me too. I was going through steps with not just my sponsor. You get 15-minute phone calls and letters in the mail, and she would send me one line from the big book, and it used to really irritate me. I would be having some catastrophic situation happening, and it would be like, let go and let God or something, and I'd be like, oh God, this is just, I can't stand you. This does not apply to my situation. But she was great. I made amends from prison, not the big ones, but I had to write letters from prison. I didn't want to do that, but it took me about a month, and I did do that. I learned that I'm capable to do things that are asked of me, because I had never been able to do that before, and I was fine. I made it through it. It was really important to me that the same women showed up to the prisons. They carried the meeting in there every week, and I knew what to expect, and it made me feel safe. I don't want to glamorize prison like it was so great. It was pretty terrifying most times. But I did do a prison tour, and there were meetings at every prison that I was in. There were women carrying the message and helping me out. When I got released from prison that day, I went to my home group because that's what I was taught to do. My home group met that night, so I went to my home group that night. And I had not gotten honest with everyone in my home group before I went to prison. People would be like, why are you here? What's going on? Did you get a DUI? And I would just say, yeah. Would not really tell. I got honest with a few women before I went. But when I showed up at my home group, there was a man that came up to me, and he had about 10 years sobriety, and he said, it is good to see you. I haven't seen you in a while. It's Susie, right? And I just knew that I was where I needed to be. He didn't say, are you picking up a white chip? Where have you been? He just, told me it was good to see me, and I believed him. That has been my home group my entire sobriety, and I'm glad that it has. It's grown and it's changed a lot, and but that group means a lot to me. When I got out of prison, I was able to work all the steps in order with one person and make direct amends, sit down with people. And, it was pretty challenging at times. I had a lot of financial amends to make. And it's amazing, court fees and attorneys and all these other things that just kind of rack up. And my sponsor told me, I had a different sponsor at this point, and she told me, she said, you're not to go out, or you don't have any money. Everyone you owe money has money. And you're not to buy coffee. You go and you fellowship, and you take your own coffee. And so I had to do that for a couple of years, but I was able to pay off all of my financial amends except one. And I'd pay that every month, and that was important to my sobriety. It helped me learn and see that I have to really clean up what I've done. And people just don't like talking about money. And I certainly didn't with my sponsor at that time either. But I was able to do that. I was also able to, make amends with my family. And it's not enough just to say, we'll stay sober. In my sponsorship family, that's just not enough. So I had to do other things to make amends to my family. Certainly the financial amends helped greatly. But there were just other things that I needed and had to do. And so I did whatever my sponsor told me to do, and it usually seemed to work out. I was able to find a God of my understanding. I'll tell you, the year that I spent in prison was probably, the best year of my life. I was able to sit down and really get honest with myself. I've been lying to myself and lying to other people for so long, I didn't really know what the truth actually was. And I was able to form a relationship with God and start praying every morning and start praying every night and making amends, step 10. I was able to start cleaning my act up as things were happening. And what a better place than prison to do that. I've been able to continue to carry the message. I didn't have a driver's license for 4.5 years. I just got it back a few months ago. And I was still able to make it to 6 meetings a week. So that's possible. I was still able to make it to work. I opened a business before I had a driver's license, and that's something that I never thought I was going to be able to do. There's so many things that I thought were not possible because I'm an alcoholic, because I'm a felon, because, all these other things that I've been labeled that I've been able to do through the principles I learned in Alcoholics Anonymous. My sponsor I'd saved up money to buy a car, and I was spiritually dying at my job. And the opportunity presented itself for me to be able to open a business. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to do that as soon as I buy a car. And, 8 months. And my sponsor was like, I think you need to pray about it. So I used the money that I'd saved up to get a car begrudgingly to open a business and get spiritually fit again. And I was still able to buy a car. God just, if I will pray and seek counsel from others and not just think that I have the right idea all the time, then I'm going to be okay. If you ask me if I'm spiritually fit, I'm always going to say yes. I need to seek counsel in some other people to make sure that is actually the truth. But I was able to get to meetings, and I have been able to do things in sobriety that I never thought were possible at all. My relationship with God grows all the time. If I don't limit God, then I continue to grow closer to God. And if I continue to seek God, then things happen in my life that just have no other explanation than something greater working in my life. I'm on the committee. I'm able to do service work in Alcoholics Anonymous, which is incredible. It can get a little dicey sometimes. You get a bunch of alcoholics with opinions going on, and I just want to not do it sometimes. But it's really good to be involved and to be in the middle and know what's going on in Alcoholics Anonymous and how it affects us at a group level or affects us at a greater level. But I've been able to be on the state convention committee, which is so great to meet alcoholics from not just the States, Canada and other places who come to North Carolina to speak and to be of service and just help out wherever I can. And I have been able to take meetings back into the prison that I was housed at. It took me a few years to get a blue card to be able to do that. But I was able to do it, and I do that every single Friday. I was also taught in Alcoholics Anonymous that when I make a commitment to something, I keep that commitment. And if that means that I don't work on Friday mornings, then that means I don't work on Friday mornings. Anytime that I've limited my schedule to make time for God, my bills are always paid. I don't ever have to, I'm not a millionaire or anything, but I don't ever have to worry about, where the next thing is going to come from. I'm not always chasing money or chasing something else. If I'm seeking God, then, I'm always right where I need to be. But I'll tell you this too, taking the meeting back into the prison was pretty terrifying for me. I didn't want to do it once I got the blue card. And, but I was encouraged to do that and to share the hope in Alcoholics Anonymous with these women. Women did that for me when I was in there, and, I really gained some perspective from that. And so I'm so happy that I'm able to do that today. However, with all of this service, my sponsor always reminds me that the next thing that I take on, none of that is important compared to working with newcomers and putting my hand out there and taking women through the book. I have sponsees that maybe don't have jobs or who, are down on their luck or whatever. If they can meet me 4 times a week, then I need to make time to meet them 4 times a week, and that's what I do. As much as they want to meet or as little as they want to meet, it's not my responsibility to get them sober or keep them sober. It's just to share the message of Alcoholics Anonymous. For a while, I used to get really peeved when I would meet up with a girl and have coffee and just explain to her what AA is and what it's not and what we do and what we don't do. That it's a spiritual solution, it's not religion. And then when they would choose someone else to sponsor them, I would be offended. Like, I just can't believe you don't want me as your sponsor. But it was also explained to me that, that was also done for me. So many women explained to me what AA was, and anytime I was stepping on a tradition when I was new and I didn't even know it, someone told me to stop doing what I was doing. And I would find out why later and to keep coming back. And they meant it. I don't think that they were being sarcastic or like, keep coming back. I think that they really meant it. And so she reminds me of that. Like, I need to be talking to women and I need to be in meetings to show the newcomer that it works. I'm still here. I haven't gotten my life back and now all of a sudden I disappear from AA. I don't have to hide in AA. I can still have a life, but it is important for me to remember that this message was shared to me freely by so many people that, that's my being maximum service to God and my fellows today. Some other important things that I've learned in sobriety, I got a car, I'm legal, I have a driver's license, that took forever. I did open a business. I've been so blessed, like God has given me so much. But it's also important for me to remember, there was a time in sobriety, like I'm not white as snow, I'm not perfect. And there have been so many people in Alcoholics Anonymous who have helped shape who I am today, a woman with dignity and grace. I don't couch date. I was taught to date with my clothes on. And, just these basic things that I couldn't grasp. I wanted to, date someone. Eventually they become a higher power, and then I didn't really need AA as much. And it was really important for someone to sit me down and tell me that what I was doing was going to kill me. And that I needed to be seeking God and not seeking a man and not seeking money or any of these other things, which was a hard truth to learn about yourself. And then I had to stay single for a while, and I just thought that was awful. But I was able to listen to someone and take what they said and put it into practice, and that has worked so well for me. If I just take suggestions, I've learned, and I continue to learn, that if I take suggestions when they are given to me, that's just like the best time. Like, I might as well not like try to manipulate it in any way or try to just do half of it, because it's not going to work out for me. And I am getting better at doing that. I do think I had to go through some things to figure out that they were not a good idea. But, you know, I'm glad that there were people willing to sit me down and not just write me off. You know, they didn't write me off because of any of the choices I made while drinking, and they didn't write me off for the choices that I made while sober either. You know, I'm able to pray today. I'm able to pray with other women. I'm able to pray with other men. We prayed before I came up here to speak. And prayer and meditation is just such a huge part of my sobriety. You know, there was a time when I was in sobriety that I was just, you know, I was trying to get my license back, and I was trying to get a blue card, and I was trying to do all of these things in my time, and I was getting really angry with God. And, you know, it says in the book that there may come a time where, you know, the man will not pray. And I definitely had a few months of that, and it was miserable. You know, I was being defiant just to be defiant, and it did not work out for me. And, you know, since that time, I get on my knees, you know, every morning and every night. And I do meditate. You know, meditation is hugely important. Prayer is important too. But meditation is when I'm able to sit and listen and not just rattle off. You know, my prayer isn't perfect today. I'm still always working on that too. But I'm able to sit and listen instead of rattle off all of these things like the checklist, like, all right, I'm praying for the still sick and suffering, I'm praying for this. And, you know, I do know it gets really ritualistic for me, and I can just say all the same things. All right, I prayed, it's good. And I try not to do that, but I do fall into that. And meditation has been so important to me, to sit and be quiet and listen and, you know, make sure that I'm not directing the show. So it's so important. You know, I always try to continue to seek God in everything that I do, including my job. You know, carrying the message, coming to speak, whatever it may be, anything I'm asked to do in AA, I do. You know, I just say yes. And that's, I didn't have it in me to say yes to anything when I was drinking. And even though I still get afraid or nervous or scared to do things that I've never done before, you know, I am still able to do that. And I can call my sponsor and tell her what's going on, you know, or I can call other women in this program. Being sober a while, I can call, you know, people who live, you know, miles away, hours away, get their take on something that's going on. I have also learned that as I continue to spiritually grow, you know, I am not okay. I get really uncomfortable when I start doing things that I know are wrong. And over the past couple of years, you know, it's been gossip or, you know, just my path has narrowed so much that I'm not comfortable doing or saying things that aren't who I am today. And, you know, it's been pretty challenging. That'll thin your friend group out really quick. And, you know, it hasn't always been fun to look at someone you got sober with and say, you know, I can't sit here and gossip about people, or I can't sit here and co-sign your BS, and I can't sponsor you. You know, that has been really challenging, but I know that in order for me to continue to spiritually grow, I have to stay on my path. And if it's narrow, then it's narrow. And there are always people who are on this path that I am, that are trying to do the things that I am. I just have to seek them out, which can be uncomfortable at times too. You know, if you're new here tonight, there were a couple of people. I had to fully concede to myself that I am an alcoholic, and I had to be willing to do a few things before my sponsor would be my sponsor. I had to be willing. You know, she asked me if I was done, all in good. She asked me if I would go to any lengths to stay sober, and she asked me if I would share you know, this message with someone else when I went through the steps. And I said yes to all of those things, not really knowing what it meant. But it meant that I had to fully concede that I'm an alcoholic and not have a reservation whatsoever that I can drink again one day successfully. And, that I would help someone else. And those are, like, the way my life is today, just those 3 little things got me there is incredible. Working these 12 steps, it wasn't always easy, but it was so worth it. And I continue to work the steps. And I continue to take other women through the steps. It just do what is asked of you. Take suggestions. That's what I did, and it's worked. It's worked for me up until, it's going to continue as long as I continue it. Thank you, Steve, for asking me to speak, and thank you all for listening.